My name is David Corbin. I'm the chair of the Legislative Committee of the Sierra Club. And Ken Winston and Sheridan, and of course, Senator Dungin are going to be uh, telling us about the Green Amendment and how it came about. So, Ken, what's your order of?
Okay, well, I'm going to start off. Well, first of all, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm Ken Winston. I'm the executive director of Nebraska Interfaith Power and Light and the um, uh, community organizer for the Nebraska Sierra Club. I want to thank everybody for joining us. I'd like to ask everyone to please mute yourselves as you join. We want to make sure that everybody can hear what's going on. We've got so many people on the Zoom that it's not going to be possible to have the kind of conversation we might normally have. But we would encourage folks to, if they do have questions, to put them in the chat. And first of all, we're going to be joined by Senator George Dungin, who introduced LR 22CA, which is the constitutional amendment to establish the right to clean air, clean water, and a healthy environment for all Nebraskans. We'll also be joined by Sheridan Macy, an attorney who wrote a paper about the Green Amendment, which was instrumental in getting it introduced in youth leaders Mia Perales and Evelina Sane. If you have questions, as I indicated, please post them in the chat. We'll try to get to as many of them as possible. Well, we're hoping to spend about a half an hour with the main presentation and then have the rest of the time for questions, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. I guess I just wanted to say we've had more than 100 people register for this. We only had really 3 days to put it together. The fact that there's this much attention to it on short notice indicates the amount of interest there is in this issue, and that's tremendous. And so we hope we don't have any technical difficulties, but if we do, we'll try to do what we can to address them if they do arise. We also want to indicate we respect your time and the fact that you're here and willing to participate in this event. And we plan to end the webinar promptly at 8 o'clock. Let me start out by introducing Senator George Dungin. Senator Dungin was born and raised in Lincoln, Nebraska. He was inspired to attend college and later law school by his mother, who he credits for his passion for justice and equality. Senator Dungin holds a Juris Doctorate from American University, where he served in the domestic violence legal clinic representing the interests of people escaping violence, especially women and children. He served the people of Lancaster County for nearly 10 years as a public defender. In 2022, he was elected to represent Legislative District 26 in the Nebraska unicameral. Senator Dungin lives in Northeast Lincoln with his partner, Britta Tullisrud, and their dog, Redford. Senator Dungin, without further ado, I would like to ask you to talk a little bit about the Green Amendment, what caused you to introduce it, and what people should know about it. And so take it away, Senator Dungin.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Ken. Can everybody hear me okay? I'll look for some nods amongst the gallery. Okay, great. Yeah, so first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for everybody being here, taking time out of your day to be here at 7 o'clock at night is really amazing. And the fact that in just a few days we were able to register 100 people to come in for this kind of webinar is fantastic. So I'm really excited about this. I don't want to take too much of your time just listening to me. There's a lot of other folks on this call who actually are experts in this area, but I'll just take a couple minutes to talk about kind of how this came to be and why I think it's important and kind of what we're doing from here. So I've had the great honor of serving in the Nebraska legislature now for 2 sessions, going into my third right now. And in that time, I've worked with Ken and Al Davis and a number of other amazing folks pretty consistently, talking about ways to continue to advocate for environmental causes and trying to do everything we can to support clean air, clean water, and a healthy environment. I've also had the opportunity then to go speak at the Youth Climate Summit now twice. And the first time I did that, I was there with City Councilwoman Sandra Washington, and we talked a little bit about a number of bills that I've had trying to help environmental causes, such as preventing HOAs from preventing you from having solar panels on your roofs and things like that. But this last time that I was at the Youth Climate Summit, I had the opportunity to see Sheridan Macy talk. And Ken had talked about Sheridan and a lot of the work she'd been doing. And I was really fortunate to get to chat with her a little bit afterwards. And we connected, and she talked a lot about some of the work that she'd been doing, advocating for the Green Amendment. And I'll be honest with you, when I came into that conversation, I did not know what a Green Amendment was. Certainly, the words made sense to me, but I didn't quite understand what it was or how it would operate. And so Sheridan, who I think we're going to hear from here in a minute, was very kind and sort of educated me a little bit and provided some information with regards to the Green Amendment, and it sparked in me some real excitement. For those who don't know, the legislature this year limited the number of bills that we can bring. And they limited us to 20 bills per senator. And in my first year as a senator, I brought 28 bills. I think in my second year, I brought 19. So I was very concerned about how many bill slots I would have in this upcoming session. But Sheridan and I spoke pretty early on about the possibility of bringing a Green Amendment. And I really wanted to do it, but we had a number of other commitments that we had. And so I was hesitant early on to promise, yes, we're going to make this happen this session just because of that bill limitation. But the more that I dug into it and the more that I learned about what the Green Amendment does and other states that have utilized Green Amendments to actually see substantive litigation protecting the right to clean air, clean water, it got more and more, it got higher, I guess, on my priority list. And ultimately, my staff and I, in looking at which bills we were going to bring and not, decided to actually kick about 4 or 5 other bills that we had to the curb for this session because we knew that the Green Amendment was really important. And we knew that having this conversation now was how we start the process to ultimately achieving this goal in Nebraska. And so one of the things I think you might hear us talk about today, or as we talk about the bill, is that, we understand that passing a constitutional amendment to clean air and clean water and a healthy environment is a big lift. Right. In the Nebraska legislature, we are clear-eyed that some of my colleagues don't understand the importance of this, or they have hesitations about what this could or couldn't do. But in order to get these things done, we need to start having the conversation as soon as possible. And we have to do so in a way that is serious and in a way that, hopes to achieve the goal as soon as possible. So very excited to have introduced the bill, the constitutional amendment. My staff has been working diligently to try to get a hearing set, and I'm very happy to say we have a hearing set now on February 26th, I believe is the date. And we're going to talk a lot more, I'm sure, about what that process is going to look like as we go through here. But the first step is ensuring that we have a good hearing. So both Ken and Sheridan and a number of us have been working incredibly hard to get together testifiers to make sure that we touch on all the important aspects of this bill, to make sure that we're talking about it from all the different perspectives that this affects, whether we're talking about the legal benefits that this constitutional amendment would bring, or the actual tangible benefits that we're going to see from family farms, to the actual benefit that we're going to see from youth, and all of those folks are who we're trying to include in our hearing. One other thing I wanted to highlight is we've been trying very hard in this whole process to lift up the voice of some of the younger folks who are advocating for this. Everybody who's involved in this right now, I know, has been doing this for a long time. And we've all been fighting to make sure that we have a healthy environment and clean air and clean water for our future generations. And so I think it's really important to make sure that it's the voice of those future generations that we're lifting up, because I think those are the folks who this really affects. So we're focusing very hard in our hearing and in some of our advocacy to make sure those voices have been lifted up. And just very excited about the hearing that we have coming up next week. I'm sure we'll get into a little bit more of the details about what that's going to look like, but we're planning a press conference, we're planning a rally, and I would love for as many folks here as possible to be involved in showing up and showing their support. So as we get on with this, happy to answer questions that other folks have, but I'm frankly just honored to get to be a part of this process and think this is one of the most important things we can do. So thank you all for being here and thank you for your continued advocacy and your work. And yeah, just look forward to the conversation we're having today and into next week.
Thank you so much, Senator Duggan. And thank you for your leadership. Thank you for standing up and taking on a challenging issue like this. A lot of legislators wouldn't do that. So I want to recognize that you took it on. So thank you. Did you want to respond to that?
Well, I was just going to say, for those who don't know my background, as Ken indicated, I'm a trial attorney, but I was a public defender for 10 years. And I tell people all the time, being a Democrat public defender in Nebraska, you have to be optimistic or else you get really upset. So I'm used to taking on some pretty difficult causes and with some success. So happy to be a fighter in the corner here.
Well, thank you for being a warrior for justice and truth and beauty and all those other things. So really appreciate your work. And I'm sure we'll have some questions for you as we go forward. Now I would like to turn it over to Sheridan Macy. I'm going to read her bio here quickly. Sheridan Macy is an environmental and human rights lawyer from Omaha. She graduated with honors from the University of Nebraska in 2020. She received her Juris Doctorate in 2024 from the University of Pennsylvania. During law school, her pro bono work with environmental rights groups and on international environmental issues inspired her to look into the feasibility of an environmental rights amendment for her home state of Nebraska. This investigation led to the writing of proposed Green Amendment language specific to the Nebraska Constitution, which was introduced as LR 22CA. Sheridan has previously worked at the UNL Center for Civic Engagement, the University of Nebraska Public Policy Center, and was a tour guide at the Nebraska State Capitol. Currently, she works for the International Nonprofit Accountability Council, which focuses on protecting communities from harms created by international development finance institutions. That's a mouthful. So really appreciate your work and glad you can join us this evening, Sheridan. So if you want to talk a little bit about your research and maybe tell us a little bit about the process of how a Green Amendment works. So
Yeah.
thank you, Sharon.
So I guess I'll start a little bit with how I discovered this, how I got into it. I actually had been doing pro bono work specifically with New York's existing Green Amendment that was passed in 2021. It's the most recent of the Green Amendments in the country. And while I was working on it, got very familiar with how the amendment works, was able to meet Maya Van Rossum, who is working on a national Green Amendment and helps support a lot of the state campaigns, and got to talk to her a lot about how this process works, and really just got very excited about the amendment. It's something that actually internationally a number of countries have in their national level constitution. And so it was super exciting to see that that had been something that states were looking at now. And the unicameral and the Nebraska system of government is something that I've always been very passionate and excited about. It's part of why being a tour guide was one of my favorite jobs ever. But knowing how much the Nebraska unicameral system values both the input of the citizens of Nebraska and also the accountability of the government to the citizens of Nebraska, the Green Amendment felt like something that would fit really well with those values. So essentially what a Green Amendment is it is a type of environmental rights amendment that creates a right to a clean and healthy environment, and long story short, allows you to sue the government if they are not upholding that right. And Green Amendments are different from just general environmental rights amendments because they have a number of specific requirements. And those requirements are designed to make the amendment as effective as possible at supporting both litigation and also supporting the government in being more proactive about addressing environmental issues. So one of the key parts of a Green Amendment's language is the trustee language. It creates a specific kind of legal relationship in which the government is responsible for protecting the natural resources of the state, but for doing so in the name of the people who live in the state and in the name of the state's long-term future. That's why we also have specific language about protecting it for future generations, just to really drive home that point that the state's job is to protect the environment that we live in for the people who live in it. A couple of the other big requirements for green amendments that help make sure that they're going to be as effective as possible. We write out as many rights as we possibly can in the language of the bill. So being specific about equitable protection, being specific about the fact that this protection is going to apply to everyone, regardless of race, ethnicity, income. Making sure that we mention specifically climate as an issue that is associated with environmental rights. That was something that came up with the Montana Green Amendment, and part of the goal with green amendments in states as we're going forward is that you learn from what other states have done. And so with Montana, they did not include specific climate language in their amendment. And so when the youth-led climate lawsuit that happened a couple years ago was brought, they had to spend a lot of time arguing that climate was included in this protection of the environment. So one of the things that we wanted to make sure that we did with the Nebraska Green Amendment was include climate, just so that that's not another battle that we have to fight. Green amendments are also deliberately located in the Bill of Rights of a state's constitution. This gives them the same level of weight as any of your other important rights. That way you're not worried about going to court or talking to the government about adjusting something and having them bring up another right that supersedes this one. This puts it on even footing with all of the other things that we really hold dear, like freedom of speech, property rights, those kinds of things. And then finally, one of the really key parts of a Green Amendment is that it is self-executing. And so that means it doesn't require additional legislative action after being passed for it to take effect. And this is really important because states obviously do not want to be sued. And so this is an argument that has been brought up frequently to try and prevent those types of environmental lawsuits. Yeah, so that's kind of the gist of a Green Amendment. And kind of just some general history before I pass it back to Ken. There are 3 currently in existence. One is in Montana, one is in Pennsylvania. These 2 are both from 1971 and 1970, respectively. So they're fairly old. They've been in place for a while. The New York Green Amendment came in 2021. It's newer. It's been one of the passage efforts that we've been able to learn from. But there's also a lot of states that are currently working on this, including Iowa, Texas, Hawaii, a number of other states that are also interested in protecting this same kind of environmental right. And so hopefully Nebraska can be a leader in this issue.
Thank you, Sheridan. I just wanted to I have a quick question, and either you or Senator Duggan could respond to it, or maybe both of you. What is the process? I mean, obviously there will be a hearing next week, but what happens then? Does it go, if it gets advanced by the committee, is there floor debate? How many votes does it need? And then what would happen if in order to get it enacted? So it looks like Senator Duggan wants to respond.
I'm happy to speak to that briefly. Yeah, so a lot of folks in this call are, probably legislative experts and know more than me about a lot of these processes. But generally, one of the things, first of all, that's really great about the Nebraska legislature is every bill gets a hearing. And so the fact that we actually get to have a hearing on this is something that you wouldn't see in a lot of other states. And that's pretty phenomenal. So we're going to have a hearing, like I said, next week. From there, the next step is the committee would have to vote it out. The Natural Resources Committee, where this is in front of, is chaired by Senator Tom Brandt. And I will tell folks on this call that I have sat down with Senator Brandt now twice and talked to him about this amendment. And tried to explain to him kind of what it does, what its effects are. And I've also tried to explain to him that I'm very serious about it. Because there are sometimes bills that come up in the legislature and people always start their hearing with, oh, we're just trying to start a conversation, or we know this isn't going anywhere, but I've told Senator Brandt, regardless of how he feels about it or others feel about it. I'm very serious about this getting a fair hearing and getting a fair shake. So my hope is if the hearing goes well, it'll get execed on, so they'll have an executive session. And then if it has a majority of members of the committee that voted out, it goes to the floor. Once it makes its way to the legislative floor, there are 3 rounds of debate. So there's general file, select file, and final reading. Constitutional amendment to ultimately pass, unlike a bill, needs 30 votes, at which point in time, if it does pass with the 30 votes, instead of just going into effect 90 days after passage, like a normal bill would, it goes to a vote of the people. And so ultimately, even if we pass the constitutional amendment in the legislature, it would then need a vote of the people in 2026 is when it would be on the ballot for the folks of Nebraska to then say that they want this to. In the event that that is unsuccessful at any stage, we can always bring the bill again. We're in a long session right now, so we operate in bienniums. So we're in the middle of our long session for this biennium. Then we have the interim, and then we have a short session, which is 60 days next year. So if the bill is not indefinitely postponed or killed, it still stays around next year. So we'd have another bite at the apple during the next session if we wanted to try to get it passed then. And then ultimately, if we're unsuccessful, then we can always bring the bill again or try to find an alternative route like a ballot initiative. I'm sure many people on this call are aware we had a number of very successful ballot initiatives that went through this last election cycle, stopping the school voucher scheme or trying to make sure we have paid family medical leave. And we've seen a lot of success in that route. The downside to a ballot initiative is you need anywhere between $2 to $4 million at this point to successfully run a ballot initiative. And so a lot of moving parts here, but that's kind of the process that we're looking at. So best case scenario, it would get out of committee, be debated on the floor, and then ultimately pass with 30 votes, but then it would still go to a vote of the people.
Thank you, Senator
So
Duggan.
Ken, there are questions in chat. Do you want to handle them now or later?
Why don't we, I guess I wanted to see if Sheridan had a response to, an additional response to that question. And then I'd like to give Mia and Evelina a chance to talk, and then we'll get to the questions. Is that okay with folks? And we definitely want to address as many questions as we can. First of all, Sheridan, do you have anything additional that you?
Yeah, I think the only thing, I guess I would add 2 things to that. So I think the first thing I would add is that regardless of what ends up happening or how we end up finally trying to get this through, it is really important to put it through a legislative session to build both discussion of what's going on with the bill and to have an established legislative history that judges can look back on when they are working on cases and that lawyers can look back on when they are trying to argue using the Green Amendment. So just having that record that's there about what this is supposed to do and how it's supposed to work is really useful. I think the other point that I would make is that for me, at least, I would be very optimistic about this as a ballot initiative. I think based on just the number of people who have expressed support about it from just a very wide variety of groups, I think that it is very reasonable to be optimistic about a ballot initiative working with this if legislative action does not.
Thank you. Well, now I know it's tempting to jump to the other questions now, but I would like to give Mia and Evelina a chance to talk about what they're doing here quickly. I'm going to introduce Mia Perales. Mia is a sophomore environmental engineering student at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. She's also minoring in political science. Currently, Mia serves as a sustainability ambassador for the Office of Sustainability at UNL and an outreach liaison for Sustain UNL. Mia has been active in lobbying efforts for environmental legislation, both locally and nationally with the Citizens Climate Lobby. In 2023, Mia was awarded the Friends of the Earth Youth Award and the Nebraska Sierra Club Youth Leadership Award. Mia, go ahead.
Hi, thank you for all joining today. Evelina and I will be talking about some events that we have coming up for youth to get active in this movement. So I'll let Evelina get introduced and then we'll go through that together.
Sounds good. I will introduce. We didn't rehearse this, so and Senator Duggan's an actor, so he knows all about improv. So Evelina Sane is a senior at Omaha Central High School and an incoming student at Columbia University, where she will pursue a degree in sustainable development on a pre-law track. She serves as the executive director of Students for Sustainability, or SFS, a regional cohort of youth dedicated to environmental advocacy at both national and regional levels. Evelina has contributed to the planning team for the Omaha City Climate Action Plan, participated in the revision of OPPD's SD7 policy, and co-authored the Omaha Public Schools Environmental Stewardship Plan. She's also an intern with Nebraska Conservation Voters, focusing on the election of candidates who champion sustainable policies and conducts environmental research at Creighton University. Alongside the SFS team, she is proud to lead youth mobilization efforts for the upcoming rally and deeply values the opportunity to partner with the Sierra Club again. So go ahead. I'll just let you guys tag team on everything you want to say. Thanks.
Yes, thank you for that introduction, Ken. It's lovely to be here tonight with you all. Mia and I are planning a plethora of youth mobilization efforts surrounding the Green Amendment and the press conference. So we'll just walk through some of the events we have planned, and then we'll ask for your support in distributing materials to any youth networks you have access to, because again, we want youth to be a very centered voice in this movement, because as the language in the Green Amendment states, we're fighting for future generations, and that happens to be us. So yes, the first event that me and I are leading, we are having testimony workshops in both Omaha and Lincoln on the evening of February 25th. There we will support written public comment submission, so sort of walking people through, specifically youth, but everyone's invited, walking people through how to submit public comments, educating them on certain components of the Green Amendment, and preparing them for the rally efforts the next day. So we really want this to be a coherent effort for the youth specifically. So it's really important that we're prioritizing the educational component of that and making sure everyone understands what we're fighting for. So the workshop in Omaha will be hosted at the Urban Abbey at 7 p.m. And then Mia can speak a little bit about the one that she is hosting at UNL and the efforts they are organizing.
Yeah, thank you. So we are going to be hosting a testimony writing party at 7 p.m. in Adele Room 128, which is in the UNL library, but anybody is obviously welcome to come. And then the morning of the hearing from 9 a.m. until around 11:15, we are going to have a sign making party. So you can come make a sign. And then if you need any help with your testimony, we will also be offering help. And if you just want to know more information about the Green Amendment, we'll be having that as well. And then from there, we are all going to march together from the Union building to the Capitol.
Yes, and then at the Capitol, we have our press conference scheduled for 11:30 a.m. So we will be in the rotunda. We have about 6 speakers lined up, including youth who are involved in their own environmental initiatives in their respective states. So we have a Princeton student who established what's called the Capitol Hill Academy. He's very politically involved, and he will be joining us as well. And then we have a Georgetown student coming to speak as well. And Sheridan will be speaking at the rally too. So we're very excited about all of that. It sort of just serves as not only a chance to garner publicity, because regardless of what happens with this amendment, it's important that we're bringing youth voices and other voices as well to recognize the fact that we all are very passionate about this, and it sort of will be a catalyst to any future mobilization surrounding it. And then we will all join in the hearing room together at 1:30 p.m., which I'm guessing they'll have to extend it to maybe another room as well, because there will probably be a lot of us there. But yeah, we're very excited about everything we have organized.
Did you have anything? Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, we will link the flyer in the chat. So if you want to send it to any youth that you know or anybody that you think may be interested, please help us out because we want to get as many youth there as possible.
That's great. And I'm presuming it's okay if some of us who are non-youth show up and applaud and uh, bring signs and what have you as well. So, and I guess I just wanted to make a comment, which is to follow up on Senator Dungan's point, which is the fact that we do want to to promote youth voices to the extent possible, and we're glad that you're stepping up. And I applaud the leadership that you and the other members of Sustain UNL and Students for Sustainability and the other organizations that you're working with. The fact that you're stepping up and uh, and and planning actions and taking advantage of and speaking out and making your voices heard. And I guess I also wanted to ask a couple other questions. It's also my understanding that one of the members of Students for Sustainability has written an op-ed which he's planning to submit to a newspaper, and that there's going to be a press release from one of the students has put together. So, and young people are showing lots of leadership on this. Do you want to make comments about that as well?
Yes, our members have been working with Brittany Cooper, who I believe is still on this call, and others to develop press releases and op-eds to distribute to various newspapers because, as Ken stated, just to reiterate, we want to really prioritize youth voices ahead of this event. So we've been working to develop those, and we plan on writing a few more just to distribute to our other Lincoln channels as well. I think we have like 7 different contacts that Chloe Moore provided us with. So
that sounds great. Well, I appreciate hearing from everybody. I wanted to ask a question of Senator Dungan before we move to the questions that are in the chat. But it's my understanding that you want to fill the room with people, and you want to have lots of voices of lots of diverse voices, people from different walks of life, bringing different points of view to the hearing, but that you do not want to have 3 hours of testimony. Would you like to elaborate on your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, I want to say this process is for the public, and anybody who wants to come obviously can testify. I would never in a million years purport to tell people don't do a thing you want to do. That being said, I will say from the senatorial perspective, when you have a hearing that has a lot of people present, it carries a lot of weight. And I've been on a committee before where the entire room is full of people, and there is definitely value and I think some validity that it lends to the testimony when you know there's that many people there supporting it, and also you see letters online and things like that. But when the testimony is, person after person after person, and you end up with hours of testimony, which for all intents and purposes is people saying the same things, it's not a bad thing, but you can lose the attention of the senators. And so what I'm trying to do, or what I think would be beneficial, is to marry those two things. I think having, bus loads of people show up, I think having a press conference, having a rally, having a march, having the room be completely full, and then even having an overflow room has weight and value. But then trying to cater the testimony to maybe 10, 15, whatever people who are able to bring their unique perspectives, whether that's the legal perspective or lived experience or a youth voice or, people of color, indigenous folks from different tribes, whatever that may be, but having that sort of breadth of experience and knowledge, but not at the end of the day having, like Ken said, hours of testimony, I think can be helpful. So that's kind of what we're thinking. And we're working with Ken, Sheridan, Mia, Evelina, a number of people to try to figure out who those testifiers may be. We're working on that. But I would absolutely encourage anybody and everybody who wants to be there to show up. Because what I've told the committee is this matters to us. And I've made them aware that there's going to be a number of people. So I want to make sure we follow through with that and they can see just how important this is to a lot of folks.
Thanks, Senator Duggan. I I guess the other piece of that is that if you're not going to testify in person, please submit comments online. And I believe that somebody already has put the link in the, yes, Evelina put the link in the chat. So, and you can go to the legislature's website and find it as well under LR22CA. And be sure that you put in LR, not LB, because there isn't any such LB thing as an LB22CA.
Can I make one comment about that too? I saw a question already in there about whether the online comments are helpful. I will tell you again, from a senator's perspective, 100%. When we see those comments flooded one way versus the other, it's very, very meaningful. I mean, I was in revenue yesterday and there was a bill that was up, and at the end of the hearing, they have to, on the record, read in how many online comments there were. And when the chair says, we have, 2 comments opposed and 435 in favor, it means something to the room and it means something to the committee as well. So we read those comments. They're oftentimes printed out for us by staff, and it does matter. So if you want to submit an online comment, I would absolutely encourage you to do so if you can't be there in person.
And there's also a question about a room assignment. Typically, the Natural Resources Committee is in room 1023, but if we're going to have overflow, they might switch it to a different room. I just wanted to bring that up. All right, let me just run through some of the questions.
Al has his hand up.
I was just going to say a couple things. First of all, at the back of the room, there are other colored forms that you can sign and fill in, and that demonstrates that you are there at the meeting. You don't have to testify, but it shows where you are. So that's one good alternative. The other thing I was going to say is the natural resources room is not a traditional meeting room at this point, and so there aren't as many seats in there as there are in a normal regular room because of the way the remodeling is going on. So hopefully there will be another overflow room, Senator. Thanks.
And for those who don't know, that was Al Davis, our Sierra Club lobbyist.
Yeah, thanks, David. Thanks, Al. Okay. Well, just quick, there was a question about how optimistic we were about getting it passed, and then what would we do if they choose to ignore the will of the people? Well, anyway, I guess I'm going to address the first part of that to Senator Duggan, and then the second part I would address to Sharon.
Yeah, so if I'm being frank, I don't know the answer to that question. And I'm not trying to be obtuse. I mean, I think we all know it's a big lift. I think we know that anytime we're talking about these issues in the Nebraska legislature, it's difficult sometimes to get some of my colleagues to care about it, or to take it seriously. But I will say there are bills that have been passed that no one thought would happen, in any number of sessions. Last year, I had a bill that I brought that I was told by advocates who I was working with, like, yeah, it's a great conversation starter, but it's not going to happen. And we passed it pretty unanimously in one session. So it can happen. And so what I've told other folks that I'm working with on this is that I'm treating this bill absolutely like it could happen this session. I don't think that we need to delegitimize it. I don't think we have to cut ourselves off at the knees by saying, oh, we're just getting the conversation started. I think it's always possible, and we never know what's going to happen. That being said, I think you go in with clear eyes and you understand that it is a big lift. And so in the event that it doesn't happen, I know Sheridan had already identified a number of other paths to success. And that was part of the conversation that she and I had when I first brought this bill. is that we know, this would be great. We're going to do our best to do this, but if this doesn't work, there's other options. So my hope is my colleagues listen and pay attention and are willing to be open-minded about this. But in the event that for whatever reason it stalls along the way, we have other options available.
Sheridan, did you want to address part of that as well?
Thought I hit the mute button and I did not. I think that was pretty much everything I would have said, but I'm happy to jump into the follow-up to that about opponents and the various.
Yeah. Why don't you jump into that?
So in terms of opponents to this, kind of a wide variety. In New York, the Farm Bureau came out against it. So it is likely that there's going to be some agricultural opposition to this. In response to that, I will say there has never been a lawsuit in any of the states that have this directed at a farmer. The vast majority of lawsuits that are being brought using this amendment are generally aimed at heavy industry, are aimed at manufacturing plants, are aimed at the government for not enforcing its own regulations, which is something that the state of Nebraska definitely needs to worry about. And have been directed a lot at, did I say waste management plants? Waste management plants is the other one that's been a big issue. So essentially, big opponents are going to be people who are likely contributing a lot of pollution to the environment and do not want to be held to a higher standard of accountability in that. And that being said, there are a lot of farm chemicals that do cause environmental harm. But in a lot of cases, the biggest offenders of those are industrial farms, and they're not individual people. They're not individual family farmers. It's bigger corporate industrial farms that are trying to mass produce as much as possible. So that would be one big opponent. The state has been an opponent in a lot of these just because they don't like having another option to be brought to court. And because state lawyers are going to advise the state to not support something that could get them in court again. And socially, the biggest concern is really that there are a lot of political and partisanship things that get associated with anything that has anything to do with the environment. And so a big concern is preventing this from being co-opted into kind of that culture war about how we talk about the environment, being co-opted into a liberal agenda type argument. It's essentially just trying to prevent this from getting buried under the same partisanship, the same misinformation that kind of everything is getting buried under anymore.
Thank you, Sheridan. I guess I just wanted to follow up on a couple things, which is as an environmental advocate, I've worked on a number of things that were told that were impossible and got them passed. I mean, saw them passed over a period of time. So let me just look and see.
Ken Har, you might want to just introduce him.
Yes, Senator Har, did you want to make a comment?
Yes.
Let me just introduce Senator Ken Har. He's a former state senator for anyone who may not know, and was a leading environmental champion. So go ahead.
I'm the other Ken in the House. When Ken Winston and Ken Har work together, amazing things can happen. What I wanted to say is that what'll be the biggest thing to defeat you is if you think it's got to happen the way you imagined it to be in the beginning. I mean, we had some examples with defeating the pipeline, getting a special session, getting wind legislation through that evolved and happened, but it wasn't how we thought it would. And so you have to be willing to roll with the punches. In the Keystone Pipeline case, something great that happened was in the fall at a Nebraska football game when TransCanada was running their ad around the stadium comparing themselves to the Nebraska football line, and the crowd started to boo. And the whole crowd in the stadium started to boo. And it really changed the way things happened in the end. And so this is a great beginning. It's such an important beginning, but there are going to be surprises along the way. And with the young people involved, Evelina and Mia, this will happen, I'm sure. And we just got to be ready to stick with it. And I'll do everything I can to support you.
And Senator Duggan, did you want to make a comment? I noticed you unmuted yourself.
Might have been an accident. No, I agree with Ken, though. I mean, in a number of the bills, in my very short time in the legislature, it never happens the way you think it's going to happen. And you have to be able to evolve and move as things come at you. So I think that's really good advice, Ken. And certainly I'll make sure that we keep everybody up to date as things come at us and things evolve too. But I do agree. This is a great start. And I think getting everybody here activated and talking about these things is really important.
Thank you. Sorry, I was just trying to look and at other questions in the chat. There was a question about whether this would have provided a cause of action in the Aldan case from Meade, Nebraska. Sheridan, you want to address that?
Can you remind me what that case was about?
That's the situation. I probably should let David or Al Davis talk about it because they're heavily involved with it. But in any event, what happened was there was a company that made ethanol from treated seeds, and it ended up creating a total disaster. I mean, there's contaminated seeds there that were killing bees and other wildlife, and there's all sorts of, and then there was a leak that went off site and it went 4 miles away. Anyway, there's thousands of tons of contaminated material that's left on site. There's contamination that runs for miles away. It ended up killing all the life in a pond. It was like 6 miles from the site. So that's what that's talking about.
Okay. Yeah, so based on that description, I would say that this is something that a Green Amendment could have supported a cause of action for. The nice thing about a Green Amendment is that it provides a very broad cause of action to go in for. It covers a lot of different environmental harms, and different things. And so I think had there been a Green Amendment in that situation, more likely than not, you could have brought a suit against the state to both enforce more strictly the regulations that are already in place and to reconsider and update regulations that are not doing sufficient job of protecting people. And then if the state is not sufficiently doing enough to address the harms that are being done, just obligating them to take action, which could look like them bringing in their own lawsuit and suing the company. It's since it is such a very broad cause of action, it gives you a lot of options for how to do that. You just will be suing the state when you're doing that.
And I had a couple of follow-up questions. There was a question about what the word self-executing means, and perhaps both you and Senator Duggan can address that.
Yeah. So self-executing is a legal concept that's across all kinds of law. Essentially, it just means that when a bill is passed, the bill is ready to go. You don't have to pass additional legislation to activate it. So like some bills, you pass it and it includes in the bill, in X number of years or X number of months, we're going to pass additional regulations or additional guidance on how this works. So when something's self-executing, you don't have to do any of that additional guidance or anything. It's just ready to go. So as soon as this would be passed, it would be usable. And the thing with Nebraska, at least, is that self-executing with the Bill of Rights, generally, judges will assume something in the Bill of Rights to be self-executing, but having the language in there just makes absolute sure that it's not something you have to argue about. And with lawsuits, the fewer things you can argue about, the better.
Senator Duggan, did you want to elaborate on that further?
No, I think Sheridan nailed it. And she really is an expert in this subject. And I know has done a lot of research on this and has worked in a number of areas. So I really appreciate her stepping in here and being able to answer a lot of those questions in a way that I sometimes would struggle to articulate. So thank you, Sheridan. I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course.
The other thing that I wanted to ask a question about is, and I guess I'll address this one also to Sheridan. Um, in your research, have you found that passage of a Green Amendment spawned lots of litigation? Did it lead to, was it a rush to the courthouse to file lawsuits?
No, so states that have green amendments have not had a rush to file lawsuits. Pennsylvania has had this for since the 70s, 1971, and it did not actually get used very much until the last decade or so. It looks like from most of the research that I've done that there's about 3 to 10 lawsuits related to this a year in states that have it. None of those suits are dismissed as being frivolous. They go through the whole legal process. Um, and so they are legitimate claims that people are bringing to the court to be debated. And I'm sorry, was there a second part to your question? I got.
That was the main question, was just
Okay.
asking whether it was.
Yeah, for the most part, while this has been used for lawsuits, it has also been really used by a lot of states to both support decisions that they're making legislatively. A lot of Pennsylvania senators and House members, since they have the two House legislature, a lot of their legislators have cited this as a reason why they are not doing something or why they would not get onto a certain bill, because they recognize that it would not be within their environmental right, or it would not be within the environmental rights amendment to do. There's also a number of cities that have used this in Pennsylvania to justify their municipal decisions, especially where the state was potentially in disagreement. So sometimes the state doesn't want to be as stringent with environmental requirements, but a community or municipal government really wants to take a stand, really wants to protect their local area. And so this has really enabled local autonomy for that as well. But for the most part, it has been a really proactive use. It has been used to help guide regulation, to help guide the way that the state approaches problems, and to support continuing to take environmental issues into account when making legislation.
Thank you. I guess, well, Senator Har's raised his hand again, so I was going to let him ask another question or make another comment.
Ken, there are a lot of moving parts and a lot of people in this. Are you a clearinghouse, or where do we go if there's a question? Senator Dungan's office, who's the best person to contact to get a question answered about where to shop or whatever?
I think we'd all be glad to help to the extent possible. I would encourage people to contact Senator Dungan's office or Sheridan, or I'm willing to respond to questions and provide information to the extent possible. I guess there was another question earlier about whether there were talking points that were going to be circulated.
Ken,
contact Senator Dungan's office, and between her and Sheridan, I think we'll put together some talking points to share with people.
Ken, could you follow up this meeting, since you had people register by email, with just a list of, you're saying here are the places like Senator Dungan's office, Sheridan or whatever, give names and emails.
Well, sure, we'd be glad to do that.
Okay, that'd be neat. Thank you so much.
Senator Dungan, do you want to respond to that as well?
I was just going to say, if you email our office, we're happy to answer questions specifically about logistics. I know that's been a big part of what we've been talking about, of talking points, how to do online comments, what the hearing looks like. So if you want to email our office, we can make sure we get that in there. But yeah, Ken, if you want to follow up with some email addresses and make sure folks on this call have the right avenues of who to reach out to, we'll make sure questions get answered. But me, my administrative aide, we'll make sure that logistical questions get answered by anybody who reaches out.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, we've got about 6 minutes left. I guess I'd like to go back to Evelina first, and then to Mia, and see if you have any additional things you wanted to share with us this evening. Yep.
I just wanted to point out, I know there's been a couple of comments in the chat about support for those submitting online testimony. If they want to reference specific resources, where should they refer?
I'm sorry, what's the question?
Sorry, if people need support or they want to reference specific resources for crafting their own online comments, where should they look or what should they reference?
Well, I would encourage folks to reach out. We'll follow up with the people who registered for this, and we'll provide them with Sheridan's contact information and Senator Dungan's office contact so that they can get additional resources. Okay, thank you. And yes, yes, yeah, yes. Following up and quickly on the question about signs in the no signs in the hearing room. You can have signs in the rotunda, as Al indicated, but they cannot be larger than 11 by 17. And so anyway, it's although I understand that people have violated that, but don't try and push it. So uh, um, so and then there was a question about Sheridan, did you want to quick talk about the Montana case?
Sure, yeah, I did actually just respond, but basically Held v. Montana, which was decided in 2023, it's going through appeals. That's the legal system takes a very long time sometimes. But in Held, the court struck down as unconstitutional using Montana's State Green Amendment, a state law which was passed to prohibit government officials from considering the impacts of climate change and the impacts on the climate environment of their actions. This would usually apply to like regulatory actions. So when making a decision about how to regulate something or about what to purchase for your regulatory body, those kinds of things, they were not allowed to consider climate change impacts. And this was enabling expansion of fossil fuel production in the state and was going to enable some additional fossil fuel sites to begin.
Thank you. Appreciate the well, quick, Al Davis.
I was just going to make a comment, Ken. There's somebody online that asked for some, talking points if there's a way that those can be gotten to him. But the portal is very easy to use on the bill website. Anybody that wants to do that should just go and familiarize themselves with it. You can put your testimony in at any time until 8 o'clock in the morning on the hearing day. So you've got a week now to do that, and it'd be great to have it starting to pile up already.
Thank you.
Thanks.
A quick comment from Senator Har, and then we need to wrap it up.
Yeah, someone said, "What's wrong with you people?" I would simply respond, "This is the way change happens, and it's the only way that significant change happens." And I really want to applaud, especially the young people who are getting involved in this. It will change. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Dungan, do you want to have a final comment?
Real briefly, I mean, I genuinely just want to say thank you to everybody here. You don't have to be involved. You don't have to take time to do this. And the fact that we have this many people logged on to a Zoom call at 8 p.m. Means something to me. I really appreciate all of the work that came before me, all of the work that's going to continue after I'm here. Yeah, I see myself just as a steward of all of this progress we're doing, and I appreciate everybody's efforts. Really want to lift up the voices again of the younger folks here who are doing a lot of this work. I'm not as young as I used to be, and I really appreciate everybody here who is continuing the fight as we move on. So I'm looking forward to the hearing, and frankly, the hearing is just the beginning. It's the start of a much longer fight conversation, but I really do believe in what we're doing here, trying to make sure that we are good stewards of the land. So appreciate everybody's time tonight. And yeah, thank you for just being here and being a part of all this.
Thank you, Senator Duggan. And I want to also thank everyone who participated in this webinar. The fact we had so many people attend on very short notice. We just got the word out starting on Tuesday. So I think we could have had 500 people if we'd had 3 weeks to prepare. So thank you so much. I also wanted to extend thank you to Brittany Cooper, David Corbin, and Eric Willitson from the Sierra Club for helping facilitate this event tonight. And thank you to all of you, and hope you have a great night.
One last comment. It is being recorded, and I will post it on our YouTube channel once it takes a while to render. So just go YouTube and search for Nebraska Sierra Club.
Yes, and yeah, and thank you to everybody to all the presenters tonight as well. Thank you and good night.